So coming up not next weekend, but literally next year is going to be UFC Fight Night Dern versus Ribas 2, the first fight night, the first UFC event of 2025, and it's going to be taking place January 11th in the UFC Apex. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, I wasn't actually planning on making a video this early for the card until yesterday I get a message from Angelo telling me that the We Want Picks website is ready for me to upload my picks and also my confident picks and stuff like that. If you guys know, you know. And I was like, oh, alright, then I guess I'll look into the card. So I looked into the card last night and then, of course, a bit today after work. And I'm going to be presenting a pretty early prediction video, but I'm going to try and make it really fast. I always fail to do this because I constantly talk about things not really relevant to the fight. But I'm going to try and make this a really quick video, and I kind of need to because I have work at 6 in the morning tomorrow, and it's now 9:30 p.m. So I don't have too much time to make this video, and also another thing as well is I actually don't know how many videos I'm going to be uploading over the new year. I did talk about it pretty briefly in my last video that I did, the top 10 KOs of the year. I've just got, like, someone in my family has fallen pretty ill, so I need to be home, and, like, home for me is not where I live right now, it's where my family lives, which is, like, a 7-hour drive away. So I'm not going to be in, like, this area over Christmas, so I genuinely don't know if I'm going to be recording videos. In fact, I won't be, because I'm not going to bring anything. I'm not going to bring my big microphone and stuff like that. And also, yeah, I'm just going to be away because I also found out that I don't have work for a couple of weeks because the company I work for just doesn't have work for me for a couple of weeks after this week. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna take a couple of weeks off. And to be honest, I think it will be a good thing. UFC is pretty full on as it is because it's on pretty much every weekend. But as you guys know, I cover everything else. I cover the PFL. Unfortunately, not last weekend, but that was because I had, like, personal stuff going on. Of course, the family news does not help. And then I cover, like, KSW most of the time. I cover LFA, Cage Warriors, you name it. So I'm pretty busy. So a couple of weeks off will probably be quite good for me. Of course, if you did want to sign up to We Want Picks, do use my code ARTEM. But just a little bit of a secret, I would honestly just wait until about the week before this card. But you will miss out on some of the odds that Angelo and Jacob are getting on their bets right now. Now, let's go. Victoria Dudakova versus Fatima Kline is the first fight on the Tapology order. You guys know that I think Victoria Dudakova is marvelous. She is beautiful. But I think in this matchup, she's probably going to fall short to Fatima Kline. Now, Fatima Kline come in on incredibly short notice against Jasmine de Vicious, and it was just too much too soon. We know that Jasmine de Vicious is an incredibly talented fighter, and I will put my hand up and say, I did pick Fatima Kline to win that matchup on short notice. In hindsight, yes, it was a very bad pick, but Fatima Kline has a very credentialed grappling background, and I did think that it could work in this matchup against Jasmine de Vicious. It didn't, but I do think that it can in this one. There is somewhat similar stylistic matchups that we have seen from between the two. I would say that Fatima Kline's fight against Victoria Dudakova honestly is somewhat similar to the Jasmine de Vicious fight, and I would also say that Victoria Dudakova has a win over a fighter with a similar fighting style to Fatima Kline in Maria Silva, who is just a very good fighter and has made a pretty good career for herself outside of the UFC in Europe. So in this one, I am going to go with Fatima Kline. I think that Victoria Dudakova is a very strong wrestler. She does have very good top control. But in pure grappling, I think that Fatima Kline against a strawweight can make things happen. And also her win over Natasha Kuziatina has aged incredibly, as now Natasha Kuziatina is the LFA champion, multiple time defending at this point. So I'm picking Kline. The odds for this fight right now, if there are any, Fatima Kline is minus 500. That is ridiculous. Some people might pick Dudakova based on the odds, I will be honest. Apologies. Now, Austin Bashi is going to be fighting against Christian Rodriguez, and I just have to triple check the weight class because I believe this is at 145. And it is at 145. And I'll be honest with you guys, I like Bashi as a prospect a lot, but I do not like Austin Bashi at 145 pounds. I genuinely believe that this guy is a bantamweight. I have heard from multiple reporters. Multiple reporters have actually told me that Bashi cannot make 135 pounds anymore. I personally don't see why. I mean, I know it's easy for me to sit here behind the camera and just be me and say, why can't Bashi make 135? He's not that tall, he's not that big, he's not big for 145 at all. But, I mean, maybe something's gone on in the past. Maybe Bashi really has struggled to make 135. I personally just don't understand necessarily how, because there are much, much, much bigger bantamweights out there than Bashi, and there are much bigger featherweights than Bashi, because Bashi was meant to fight Tommy McMillan, who was like a 6 foot tall or 5'11" featherweight, who was huge on the Contender Series. He ended up fighting Ramos instead. He takes on Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez is the prospect killer, and he truly is a tough stepping stone for any prospect. He's proven that before. He beat Ribas Jr., he beat Cameron Simon, and he beat Isaac Dalgarian. Was probably robbed Dalgarian in that fight. He lost to Rosa, which is funny but random. I think in this one though, Bashi is just such a talented guy. He's so good at wrestling and so good at grappling. We saw C-Rod's great takedown defense against Ribas Jr., but that come after the first round when Rosas Jr. gassed out. I think that Bashi is actually a somewhat similar fighter to Rosas Jr. in the fact that he is a constantly coming forward wrestler. He does have some hands on the feet, but I don't think he's going to just exert himself like Rosas Jr. did. I think that he is going to be a bit more patient in there. I think he's going to be just a little bit, honestly, maybe even a little bit better as well, just because of the prospect status that this guy does have and the wins that this guy does have. I mean, a win over Felipe Vargas is no joke, and he smoked Escar, which is pretty impressive as well. One thing I worry about with Bashi, his striking defense isn't great, but his striking itself is okay. It's actually pretty decent, and it is getting better. Bashi right now is minus 190. Relatively fair price tag, I would say. I think he does beat Christian Rodriguez in this fight. Nurullo Aliev now is going to be making his return. This guy has been out of the octagon for a while. In fact, he is not going to fight in 2024 at all, as by the time this fight goes around, it will nearly be 2 years that this guy has sat out of the octagon. Personally, I actually don't know why. Now, of course, I do have about 2.5 weeks to figure out why when I do my full card final prediction video in a couple of weeks. But I'm going to assume it's due to injuries and maybe a couple of other reasons as well. But at the end of the day, he's 24 years old now. He was 22 years old when he fought against Rafael Alves. He was like 22 years old when he fought. He's 21 years old, I think, at the time that he fought Josh Wick. But this guy, Nurullo Aliev, he looks like Khabib, he fights like Khabib. He's very limited on the feet, but one thing I would note about him is in the times that he does spend on the feet, he actually doesn't have bad leg kicks, and his jab is actually pretty good. He fights behind the jab a lot, but what he wants to do is he wants to get the takedown and he wants to get the top control. That's pretty much all he wants to get in his fights, and a lot of his wins, I believe, have come by decision, but he actually is pretty dangerous when he is on top. Yes, they have, but he smoked Josh Wick when he got on top of him. Yanal Ashmouz is an interesting fighter because he is actually very powerful on the feet and he can wrestle in its own right. He will be the much better striker here, but it just comes down to whether or not he can stop the takedowns. And I'm going to guess that Aliev has made the improvements over the last couple of years. So if that is the case, I do think Aliev can get the takedowns, and I think he will get a decision win over Yanal Ashmouz here. Nurullo Aliev, looking at the odds right now, is minus 400. He hasn't fought for 2 years, guys. What are we doing? Now, Santiago Ponzinibbio now fights against Carlston Harris. I think that this is actually a very winnable fight for Santiago Ponzinibbio. He is 38 years old now. He has lost quite a few fights recently. Started with the big comeback fight, which ended in a loss to Li Jingliang in 2021 after he spent multiple years away with that blood illness, I believe it was. It was pretty serious, what it was, and he lost to Li Jingliang in his big comeback, which was sad, and then ever since then he has been losing quite a lot of fights, but he has been looking pretty decent against good competition. You know, a split decision loss to Muslim Salikov, who just got the spinning wheel kick KO. Split decision loss to Mikhail Pereira, has aged incredibly. Split decision loss to Jeff Neal, has aged pretty well. So overall, he's been having pretty close fights with these guys that are what I would consider very good. Now, I guess a bit of a red flag is the fact that Alex Morono 2 years ago, though, was able to find a lot of success against him. But I think in this matchup against Carlston Harris, I think on the feet, Ponzinibbio is going to have a very serious striking advantage. Carlston Harris's striking just isn't technical. It is relatively effective, I would say, for a guy that genuinely does rely on his grappling quite a bit. But he just doesn't have great striking defense, and he just isn't the most technical striker. I think he's going to leave himself open for a better striker like Ponzinibbio to land much better shots on him. So I am going to pick Santiago Ponzinibbio here to win the fight. And he's an underdog as well, so there we go. That's my first underdog pick of the card. I do like Ponzinibbio to win this matchup. Now, Jose Johnson fights against Felipe Bunes. Felipe Bunes is a very interesting case because I believe he was meant to make his debut on short notice against Kopylov, and he withdrew. And if you do actually Google what this was, he actually failed a USADA test, but it must not have been very serious, or it might have even been due to medical reasons. Maybe he was on something to recover from an injury. I don't know when he accepted this matchup against Zalgas. But if you do Google Felipe Bunes USADA, he did fail a test, but he was only suspended for, I believe, about 6 months. Like, it was very minor, so it must have genuinely been a tainted supplement or something along those lines. I mean, even Felipe Bunes himself posted on Twitter and said, "Oh, hey guys, this is what happened." He didn't hide it, and he said, "I've sent the paperwork through to get it fixed." But he takes on Jose Johnson here. Now, Felipe Bunes, to talk about him, he's a very well-rounded fighter. He can wrestle, but he does throw a lot of kicks. He actually is considering, in general, flyweight. He's actually a pretty big flyweight, standing at 5'7". But he's fighting against Jose Johnson, who's a 6'2" flyweight. This is a guy that was pretty big at 135 pounds. Somehow managed to make 125 pounds. I don't know how he did it. And this is honestly a move that I still am a little bit shocked by. I think Jose Johnson is actually a really, really fun fighter. He's a very talented Muay Thai guy. He pretty much is a pure striker, but he showcased really good grappling in his Jack Cartwright matchup against him on the Contender Series. And he does have really good wins on the regional scene. He's got really good losses on the regional scene as well. I know that doesn't make sense, but the guys he's lost to on the regional scene are very talented. 125 doesn't make sense. It's just not a move that I like whatsoever. This guy's ceiling at 135 pounds, I don't think it's super, super high, but it is higher than it is at flyweight, I think. Guys at flyweight are faster than him. Guys at flyweight, a little bit more technical than him, even though he is a very, very talented Muay Thai guy. I'm picking Johnson for now. I think that the fact that he's 6 foot tall and is going to play a factor here. I think that a lot of this fight probably will take place on the feet. So I am going to pick Johnson, and I believe that he probably is a favorite here in this matchup. Jose Johnson's minus 200. I don't like those odds. That's way too wide, considering my very, very low confidence on Johnson. And I might flip to Bunes. Bunes is a guy that does have some pretty good wins. He beat Yuma Horiuchi, who genuinely at one point I thought was about to make his way into the UFC because he got a couple massive KOs. Speaking of massive KOs, oh my goodness, am I excited to see this. Andreas Gustafsson takes on Preston Parsons. This is Andreas Gustafsson's UFC debut, and I love Andreas Gustafsson. This guy is a complete maniac. If you saw my Dana White's Contender Series breakdown, I was so on the fence about whether or not he was going to beat Pat Pitlick, and I did pick him to beat Pat Pitlick in the end, because if you watch this guy fight, oh man, he is just all action. He's constantly coming forward and he is throwing down. Every single one of Andreas Gustafsson's fights that I have seen have been just incredible, except for the fight against Yorton Lutterbeck, which was kind of random because I believe Yorton just wrestled a lot in that fight. But his fight against Tony Lampinen, war, an absolute war. I mean, Gustafsson's getting rocked, he's getting dropped, and he comes back, he drops and rocks Lampinen, and that just keeps going, man. It's just absolutely insane. He got a massive KO in the first round. It was like a big leaping right hook in 10 seconds, by the way. It was insane. Against Pat Pitlick, he looked a bit smarter, he fought a bit more reserved, but he did what he normally does. Comes forward, crashes into the pocket, clinches up, wears you down, and then just knocks you out. And that's what he did. He knocked out Pat Pitlick doing exactly that. This guy is an absolute maniac. And the thing about him is I don't think that his fighting style is going to probably put him in like the top 15, top 20, or championship conversations. But my goodness, is it going to be a fun ride on the way. And it is a shame. It is a shame that this fight is in front of the Apex. This fight should be in front of a massive crowd. Hopefully we can get a Gustafsson fight in front of a crowd at some point. Gustafsson versus Billy Goff would just, like, that's if you know, you know, that's like the craziest fight I think you could make right now at 170 pounds. But Preston Parsons, he's going to be a pretty tough opponent here. Preston Parsons, he is like mostly a grappler, I would say, but on the feet, I mean, he's called Pressure Parsons. He wants to move forward. He wants to clinch. He wants to do what Gustafsson wants to do. He is probably like a slightly more technical striker. I mean, Gustafsson just doesn't really have that much technique. He just throws bombs. But I think he is going to be hittable enough for my boy Andreas Gustafsson to get the KO. I mean, this pick could change, I'll be honest. But, I mean, oh, dude, I'm just so hyped up on Gustafsson making his debut. He's minus 200 again. Odds a little bit wide, man. That's the thing. When you get these cards that are so far away, the odds always change. Close favorites might become big favorites. Big favorites, money might come on the underdog and they might close. You never know. But for now, I think that minus 200 for Gustafsson's a bit wide. I'm going to pick him to win by KO, though, because, I mean, Gustafsson, I would be shocked if he won a decision. Genuinely shocked. Now we have Pillow Hands Punahele fighting against Uros Medic. I think Uros Medic wins this matchup. I think that it just kind of quite simply is a good matchup for him. I know that is just terrible breakdown, but as I said, I want to make it fast. Uros Medic is a pretty technical kickboxer. He does have a lot of finishes. A lot of his wins in the regional scene come to not great fighters because he was fighting out of Alaska. In fact, he might still fight out of Alaska. I don't think he does, but he'd come up to 170 recently after finding mixed success at 155. And he takes on Pillow Hands Punahele, who come down from 185 pounds to 170 pounds after losing a couple of fights at 185. Punahele Soriano burst on the scene at 185. This guy was knocking out everybody, and he was looking really good while doing it. Ran into a couple of pretty tricky guys. You know, he does have a wrestling background, which was showcased against Maximov. But now he's come down to 170 pounds, and Pillow Hands Punahele could not knock out Miguel Baeza. And if you saw that fight, Miguel Baeza was in all kind of trouble throughout the entire fight, and Pillow Hands Punahele could not find the KO. It was incredible how he couldn't find the KO. Miguel Baeza wasn't defending himself for like 75% of that fight because Punahele Soriano was on his back just trying to smoke him with ground and pound. An incredible performance to not get the KO. But anyway, Uros Medic, I think just strike for strike is more technical here. Although I do call him Pillow Hands Punahele, he does have a lot of power still, and I think Uros Medic will need to respect that, but I think nonetheless, Uros Medic is the more technical striker. He's coming off a win at 170 against Tim Means. Before that, he lost to Urubai, but Urubai fought him on short notice. In this fight, though, Medic is minus 210. Is what it is. I don't really disagree with the odds that much. I think Medic does get a KO over Pillow Hands Punahele. Now, Ernesta Kareckaite is going to be fighting now against Nicolle Caliari, and this is probably the fighter on the Contender Series that I was the most wrong about. In fact, both of them were. Except for Kareckaite, I can actually say Kareckaite, in her fight, her fights on the regional scene, this girl genuinely threw like 3 strikes around. It was incredible how low volume she was, how little she did. She did nothing. And then she fought against Kali Judas. I believe most strikes landed in Contender Series history. It was a war. It was fantastic. And then she fought a grappler in Barbosa. She got out-grappled the whole time. She's fighting the exact same stylistic matchup that she just lost to in Barbosa, except now she's fighting a more well-rounded fighter. Nicolle Caliari. I didn't pick Nicolle Caliari because I couldn't find tape on her except for a couple of fights. And I know that doesn't make sense, but from what I did see from her opponent, who was Corinne Laframboise, Laframboise actually looked to be pretty decent. Now, I liked her grappling a lot, Laframboise this is, and then as for Nicolle Caliari, I couldn't find any of these recent fights. I could see her fight against Kay Hansen in 2019, by the way, and then of course her fight in 2017, but that was all I got from Caliari. I didn't see any of her recent fights, but one thing I will say about her now, her fight against Laframboise, she looked really good. Now, the fight didn't really take place on the feet. The fight ended in the first round, I believe, by sub, relatively early on, 4:45. And Nicolle Caliari had a clear striking advantage, but the fight got down to the ground, and she locked up a sub. She had multiple sub opportunities as well, which she did try and take before getting the armbar. And I think now coming in there against Ernesta Kareckaite, who just is a like what she typically is a low volume kickboxer. We just saw her get out grappled by a pure grappler. Nicolle Caliari has a Muay Thai background. She's got good grappling. She just out grappled a pure grappler in La Framboise. I don't think this is a good matchup for Kareckaite. I'm gonna pick Caliari here. And the odds on her, Caliari's plus 165. Plus 165. Okay, that might be, I mean, like, the odds makers and me just are not getting along today. But I'm picking Caliari. I'm picking Caliari by sub. I mean, honestly, I think she does present danger on the feet to someone like Kareckaite. And she's got really good grappling. We're going to move on. I'm genuinely shocked by the odds there. Marco Tullio fights against Iho Potieria. Marco Tullio's a pretty tough fighter to really get a good read on, because a lot of people in, like, the MMA sort of community, I guess you would call it, are very, very high on Marco Tullio. And after watching his most recent Contender Series performance, I'm not ready to jump on the Marco Tullio train just yet. You watch his fight against Mateo Gudakos, and this could potentially be just because he was told that his performance against Yusri Belgari was pretty boring. Against Duclos, this guy spends the whole fight trying to get a highlight reel KO. He's throwing 125% of power into everything. He's overthrowing everything. He's showcasing absolutely no defense. Now, I do know that's the shooter box special, but you can't showcase absolutely no defense against a guy that is pretty powerful on the feet. And Duclos was pretty powerful on the feet. It's just, he just wasn't, like, that great to catch him lacking in those mistakes that he was making. And if Marco Tullio comes into the UFC with that same fighting style, he's going to get knocked out by someone. Now, it might not be Iho Potieria, but you can't try that against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, for example. You're going to get slept doing that. And if you watch that fight, you understand what I mean, because the whole time Tullio is overthrowing and he's leaving himself wide open. And Duclos does never capitalize, to be fair. Now, Tullio is a shooter box guy. He's a Muay Thai striker with grappling, with clinch, with wrestling. You know him, he's got it. And he does take on Iho Potieria here, who only has striking. I do actually understand that recently he has been shooting for takedowns, which is interesting. I don't actually mind seeing it. But Potieria is a former guy at 205 pounds. In hindsight, he really was a 185er the whole time. He's really tamed his striking a lot, because this guy used to be a lot more aggressive than he is right now. And honestly, I think that the UFC sees this as a layout for Tullio. And I think if Tullio does just shoot for takedowns, the submission is there. Tullio is a wild man on the feet. I don't like how open he leaves himself, but Iho Potieria, I think at this point, I think Marco Tullio is going to just, honestly, I think he's going to crash, get into the clinch, fall into a takedown attempt, and then sub Potieria. I'm actually going to pick Marco Tullio to win by submission. I'm expecting the odds to also be pretty wide. There's minus 400. I did expect that. I wouldn't bet it though, by the way. But I think Tullio wins by sub. It's kind of like an underrated maybe prop to pick, because he is a shooter box guy. Abdul Razak Al Hassan now fights against Cesar Almeida. I am going to pick Cesar Almeida in this matchup against Razak Al Hassan. Razak Al Hassan is always going to be dangerous on the feet. He does, of course, have that judo background as well, which he doesn't really use in his fights all that often. But a lot of his training partners say that he does train judo a lot, so maybe we're going to see that happen here, because he is taking on the former Glory kickboxer in Cesar Almeida. Cesar Almeida, we have seen him look pretty good on the feet recently. He did, of course, lose to another very technical kickboxer whose name slipped my mind, Roman Kopylov, and it was a pretty close matchup. And Kopylov is a guy that a lot of people are very high on. He did bounce back with a win over our GOAT, Iho Potieria himself. In this matchup, though, Cesar Almeida, he's nearly 37 years old, but he's a former Glory kickboxer. He's fought Alex Pereira 3 times, beaten him once, by the way, as well, which is quite cool. And he just is the better striker out of the two. Now, can Abdul Razak Al Hassan knock him out? Yes, he could. I mean, I could see that happening. I think 11 out of Abdul's 12 wins are the first round KOs, which is just nuts to have, honestly. But I think for Cesar Almeida, I think it's just going to be a little bit too good to deal with that. And the thing about Cesar Almeida as well, we saw him showcase grappling in his Contender Series fight against Lucas Fernando, both defensive and offensive, which was very odd, because we haven't really seen it so far in the UFC yet. But We know that it's there. If he really needs to lean on it, I like Almeida in this fight. I like Almeida to win by decision, but if he's going to get a KO, it's probably going to be in the second or the third round as Abdullah Razak Al Hassan to slow down. Looking at the odds right now, Almeida's minus 250. Seems like the odds makers do quite favor him in this fight, and I don't really blame them all too much. Magomed Gaziasilov now fights against the debuting Bruno Lopes. I like Gaziasilov in this fight a lot. I am a lot more high on Gaziasilov than I think literally anyone else is, and it is just because I like the fact that this guy is an incredibly technical striker at 205 pounds. You don't see that all that much, and another thing about Gaziasilov that we saw in his last fight is that he is willing to mix in a lot of wrestling as well, and I think that against Bruno Lopes, Gaziasilov's just going to be the much faster guy out of the two. Bruno Lopes is just really slow. We saw that in his fight against Brenson Ribeiro. We saw that in his fight against Mikhail Saziniani. Bruno Lopes was once 12-0. He was once one of the biggest prospects, 11-0, but he was once one of the biggest prospects at 205 pounds. I believe I said that he was the prospect to watch when he fought against Ribeiro. How wrong was I, huh? This guy, Bruno Lopes, he's disappointed a lot, man. He's disappointed a lot. I thought he looked pretty bad against Brigagao as well. So, Lopes, really slow, no striking defense. He does have grappling, but he chooses not to use it. I can't pick that guy, man. I think Magomed Gaziasilov, we've seen technical striking from him before. We've seen dominant top control from him before. Is he the most exciting guy? No, but I personally quite like him. I think he is very technical for this weight class. I think he does get by Bruno Lopes here. He's only minus 150. Lopes is plus 120. Lopes is dangerous, but I think Gaziasilov just simply is the better fighter out of the two. Thiago Moises now fights against Trey Ogden. Ogden just keeps proving me wrong, man. I mean, I've got to give the guy that credit, huh? He upset Daniel Zellhuber in what was a pure striking matchup a couple of years ago. I didn't see that coming. I don't think anyone saw that coming. He just finds ways to win. And then recently, he beat Loic Radzhabov, and I thought Loic Radzhabov was going to beat him. I was proven wrong, so I've got to give Trey Ogden a lot of credit here, because I think he's probably going to do it again, because I am going to pick Thiago Moises in this fight right now. Now, I am willing to change the pick. This is definitely one of those fights I'm very low confidence in right now. But just in the pure grappling, I know that Ogden's a black belt. I know that he's a coach as well. I know that he's really, really good. I know that he's like, I believe he might even own the gym that he trains at. But I know Ogden's really good, and I do respect his skills a lot because he does continue to prove me wrong. Thiago Moises is still Thiago Moises. Thiago Moises has always been that guy that has either been in the top 15 or he's been guarding the top 15. He's been doing it for years now. And he's proven himself, I feel like, against the best. Losing to Ludovic Kline is what it is. Losing to Benoit Saint-Denis, it is what it is. Aside from that, a lot of really good wins, I would say. A pretty decent loss to Islam Makhachev. He took Islam Makhachev to the 4th round. That was the main event of a fight night, by the way. That is where Thiago Moises has once been at in his career. And I think in this fight against Trey Ogden, Ogden's striking is tricky. Like, it's not really like the best striking, but it is just so effective at this weight class. I don't understand how he just beat... He beat Daniel Zellhuber in a pure striking matchup, by the way. But Ogden, he does fight behind his jab a lot. He does use his range very well, too. And he will do that against Moises, who's only 5'9". But I think just grapple for grapple, wrestle for wrestle, I can't look past Moises, man. Like, Thiago Moises, maybe it is just me who has been following the UFC for a long time, and I just remember Moises always been that ranked guy. He's always been there. He's always been the guy that's been getting pretty big wins, pretty big grappling moments as well. And maybe now it's kind of like the same thing with me and Tony Ferguson. I'm just not looking at the same guy anymore, which doesn't make sense because Moises isn't even 30 years old right now. Maybe he's just run into some bad matchups. I'm not really ready to convince myself that Trey Ogden is that guy right now. And I'm sure that Trey Ogden is going to be on an absolute mission to prove me wrong. So I'm picking Moises. To my surprise, Moises is the favorite, minus 155. I don't really mind that, to be honest with you. As I said, I'm picking Moises. I like this grappling in this fight. And it looks like the public is on Moises as well. Now, the Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov is the co-main event of the night. Chris Curtis, man, he just comes and goes, doesn't he? He started out in the UFC, super, super active. Everyone was loving Chris Curtis, and then he took a couple of weird losses. He had that weird no contest as well to Imavov. The loss to Gastelum was pretty weird because I think he was knocked down by a headbutt, and, you know, like, arguably that's what lost him the fight. And then he lost to Brendan Allen, and, you know, like Chris Curtis is Chris Curtis. If you've been on Twitter for any amount of time, you'll know that Chris Curtis is Chris Curtis. I don't even know if he's got a Twitter anymore. He might have deactivated it. In fact, he probably has. But Chris Curtis, pretty much a pure boxer at this point, and just in general, really. He is like a pure boxer. He's got the very much like a boxing sort of guard where he keeps his hands very close to his face when he's fighting, and he just wants to box you. He can shoot takedowns. He can wrestle if he needs to. He can defend takedowns if he needs to. But overall, he wants to box. But he's taking on a guy in Roman Kopylov who doesn't want to box. He wants to kickbox. And I think in a pure striking matchup out of these two, right now, I'm ready to jump on the Roman Kopylov train. He did take a tough loss to Anthony Hernandez, but Hernandez is a nightmare matchup for him, man. Chris Curtis ain't going to go out there and shoot 20 takedowns in one round. And then beat Cesar Almeida, as I did say before. And I think, honestly, just like strike for strike, I like Kopylov's arsenal more. Chris Curtis has the boxing, Kopylov has the kickboxing. We've seen this take place before, this sort of matchup before. And I think that Kopylov is going to take it by decision here. I think that this is going to be Kopylov's entry to the rankings, despite the setback by Hernandez, who just had a main event in his own right. Kopylov's minus 240. Don't hate it. Curtis isn't getting any younger. He's been injured a lot recently as well. Let's move up. Mackenzie Dern now fights against Amanda Ribas. Originally a 3-round fight at Tampa, Florida. I know Jacob from We Want Picks went to Tampa, Florida. A large reason probably was to watch this fight. I think he's going to go to the Apex to watch this fight. And then another main event for Amanda Ribas. Pretty big deal for her, I would say, and fans of her, like Jacob from We Want Picks, of course. But to talk about this fight, Mackenzie Dern spent the last year going on a CTE speed run. So what she did was she got knocked out. She got knocked out by Jessica Andrade to end 2023. And then she fought Lemos and took a lot of damage against Lemos. And now she's going to fight Ribas again. And Ribas, you know, is a very high volume Muay Thai fighter. Her boxing in itself isn't the most technical, but she does have very, very fast hands and very, very fast technical kicks. And she can grapple as well. I mean, like, what more is there to say? She can grapple too. She's coming off a loss to Rose Namajunas, but it was a pretty close fight, to be fair, and Rose Namajunas has come up to 125 and has found quite a bit of success, really, after being the champion. One of the greatest strawweights as well, actually, just in general, considering all of the level of competition she has beaten. But against Dern, we know what Dern brings to the table. She brings grappling, and still, that's about it. She tried to trick me. She tried to fool me by beating up Angela Hill in a main event. I believe it was actually pretty recently as well, in 2023. And a lot of that fight, she won on the feet, which was just shocking to me. She fooled me into thinking she could strike. She fooled everyone, I think, into thinking she could strike, because then she fought Andrade and got knocked out. She fooled me, and I will not be fooled again. I will not I will not pick against Amanda Ribas in this matchup. I think that Amanda Ribas is going to be the much better striker. I think that Ribas can keep the fight on the feet if she needs to. And I think that even in the grappling, I know that Dern is like a very, very talented grappler. She does have a big grappling accolade behind her and a lot of subs in the UFC. Ribas can grapple as well. I would be sick to my stomach if Ribas goes out there and offensively wrestles. I will. But as long as the fight's on the feet, I like Ribas on the feet. I think Ribas wins this fight. She probably wins the fight by decision, but knowing Dern's track record recently, she could get knocked out. You never know. Another thing about Dern as well is this camp will not have gone smoothly for her at all. Like, at all. I believe she broke up with the guy, Antonio Tricoli, who apparently she married. And if you guys don't know, Antonio Tricoli allegedly assaulted her ex-husband. So Dern has a kid with her ex-husband, and allegedly Tricoli assaulted that guy while he went to pick her up from school, like from the school. Like, I mean, her life, like outside of MMA, has been a mess recently. So that's something to think about as well. Maybe I know that personally I don't really get into that kind of stuff, but if you're on the fence and that kind of moves you over a little bit, could even move her to the other way. Maybe she really needs the money because now she probably has to pay two people. No, she only got to pay one child support. Anyway, move on. I'm picking Ribas. Most people are picking Dern. Okay, I like Ribas though. I like her striking a lot. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I said it was going to make it fast. 35 minutes still. That's a lot it's a lot slower than I thought. I was genuinely going to try and smash out a 14 fight video in 28 minutes. But it is what it is. I'll see you guys in the next one, whenever that is.